You still pray, you still show up, you still go through the motions, church, Bible, the conversations you're supposed to have. But somewhere along the way, something went quiet inside you. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. You watch things that used to move you and feel nothing. You wait to feel something in worship and it doesn't come. And the most terrifying part isn't the numbness itself, it's the thought that maybe something is permanently broken in you. I need you to hear this before we go any further. It isn't. What is happening inside you has a name, it has a cause, and it has a way through. And today, we need to talk about all of it. Emotional numbness is not a spiritual problem that accidentally looks like a psychological one. It is a physiological response, something your nervous system does on purpose to protect you when it has been overwhelmed for too long. When a person experiences prolonged stress, grief, trauma, or exhaustion without adequate rest or repair, the nervous system moves into what researchers call a dorsal vagal shutdown. It is the deepest and oldest branch of the vagus nerve activating, a state that evolution designed for extreme threat, the kind where there is nothing left to do but go still and wait. In that state, emotional responsiveness dims, motivation flattens. The ability to feel pleasure, connection, or spiritual aliveness decreases significantly. You are not broken. You are in survival mode, and survival mode does not leave room for feeling. This is why emotional numbness so often follows seasons of doing too much for too long. The caregiver who gave everything and had nothing left. The person who walked through a devastating loss and held themselves together so completely that the grief never had a place to land. The faithful Christian who served, led, showed up, and smiled, right up until one day they sat in a pew and realized they felt absolutely nothing. The numbness is not the enemy. The numbness is the message. It is your inner world telling you, in the only language your nervous system has left, that something needs to change. And here is where faith and psychology intersect in a way that is rarely talked about honestly in Christian spaces. The dark night of the soul. That phrase coined by the 16th century mystic John of the Cross describes exactly this experience. A season where God seems absent, where prayer feels like speaking into a wall, where the spiritual feelings that once grounded your faith have completely disappeared. For centuries, theologians have debated what causes it, but what we understand now through neuroscience is that the dark night is not only a spiritual phenomenon, it is also a physiological one. Your body and your soul are not separate. When one shuts down, the other goes quiet too. Psalm 22 opens with perhaps the most honest words in all of Scripture. My God, why have you forsaken me? David did not write that verse in a moment of theological confusion. He wrote it from the center of the experience you may be living right now. The raw, embodied reality of reaching for God and feeling nothing reach back. And what the church rarely tells you is that this psalm, this cry, this exact experience of spiritual emptiness is not the opposite of faith. It is, for many people, the beginning of a deeper one. Because faith that has only ever existed in the presence of feeling is not yet the faith that survives the absence of it. So where does numbness come from? There are typically three roots, and they often overlap. The first is unprocessed grief. When we experience loss of a person, a relationship, a version of our life we expected, and we do not allow ourselves to fully feel it, the grief does not disappear. It goes underground. And one of the most common ways buried grief surfaces is as numbness. The emotional system becomes so overwhelmed with what it cannot yet process that it shuts down input altogether. The second root is chronic overfunctioning. When you have been the strong one, the helper, the one who holds it all together for months or years without pause, your emotional system eventually goes offline simply from exhaustion. And the third, and this one is perhaps the most important for people of faith, is spiritual performance. When you have been performing faith rather than living it, when church has become a role you play rather than a community you belong to, when prayer has become an obligation rather than a conversation, the soul eventually stops responding to what has stopped being real. Here is what most people do when they notice they have gone numb, and why it almost always makes things worse. They try harder. They push themselves to feel more, pray more intensely, worship more deliberately, manufacture the emotional response they think they should be having. And when that doesn't work, they conclude that something must be spiritually wrong with them, that they have drifted too far, that God is punishing them, or that they have lost something they may never get back. This is not a path toward healing. It is a path toward deeper shutdown, because the nervous system does not respond to pressure with openness. It responds to pressure with more protection. Trying to force yourself to feel something you genuinely cannot feel right now is the equivalent of demanding a broken arm to lift weight. The demand does not heal the injury. It compounds it. What the nervous system actually needs in order to come back online is safety. Not performance, not effort. Safety. The biological experience of being in an environment where it is finally okay to relax, where nothing needs to be managed, controlled, or held together, where you can be exactly as you are, including numb, including empty, including uncertain, without consequence. And this is where the character of God becomes not just theologically true, but physiologically necessary. Because the God of Scripture is not a God who requires you to feel a certain way before he will draw near. He is the God who, according to Psalm 34:18, is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The crushed spirit is not the one he is waiting for you to fix before he shows up. It is the precise location where he promises to be. So what does healing actually look like? Practically, in a body and a soul that have gone quiet? It begins not with more spiritual activity, but with less. It begins with rest that is not earned, with permission to stop performing and simply exist, with small sensory moments of safety, a walk outside, a warm drink, a song that doesn't require anything from you, a conversation where you don't have to hold yourself together. These are not distractions from God. For a nervous system in shutdown, they are the conditions that make it possible to sense him again. It also requires honesty. The kind of honesty David modeled in Psalm 22, not the sanitized version of prayer you offer in public, but the actual words that are true right now. God, I feel nothing. I am exhausted. I don't know if I believe what I used to believe. I don't know if you're there. That prayer, that exact prayer, is not the opposite of intimacy with God. It is the most intimate thing you can offer. Because intimacy is not built on perfect feeling. It is built on presence, on staying in the room even when everything in you wants to go through the motions and leave, on speaking what is true even when what is true feels terrifyingly empty. Your numbness is not evidence that God has abandoned you. It is evidence that you are human, that your body and soul have limits, and that those limits have been reached. The path forward is not through performance. It is through permission. Permission to be exactly where you are, to feel exactly what you feel, including nothing, and to trust that the God who met David in his darkest psalm is the same God who is meeting you in yours. If this reached something in you today, I want you to subscribe to this channel. Every week I create content at the intersection of psychology and Christian faith, because I believe your inner life matters, and I believe you deserve the language to understand it. You are not alone in this.